Hey fam. So, Black Mirror Bandersnatch came out like almost a year ago, and I figured it's a great time to make a highly relevant video because I saw it for the first time a couple days ago. I have trouble watching movies at home. They make me anxious because at the end I have to decide how I feel about something. Whereas with a TV show, it's not over and I can watch a few episodes and I don't have to have a final verdict. But I want to watch more movies, so in an effort to do so, I thought that Bandersnatch might be a little easier because you're like making discrete choices. It's like a bunch of little videos put together into a big thing, seemed a little more approachable. Just to say in the beginning, I'm not like a Black Mirror fan. I haven't really watched a lot. I watched one episode, the one with like lesbians in the afterlife, because my friend wanted me to see it. And it was, it was cool. So, my husband and I sat down. We decided that we would each say what we wanted to do at an option, and then if we disagreed, I would just get my way, because that's the way it goes. Overall, I thought the way that it was technically done and the way the system of the choices happened was really awesome. Like, the first time we chose something and there wasn't a pause or a gap or like a transition into that choice, it was like, oh, it's so streamlined, it's amazing. And then afterwards I read that like one of Netflix's hesitations was kind of like the choppiness of other Choose Your Own Adventures videos, and I think they did a really good job with making a system where that was not a problem. Also, the timed element was cool. There was one time where like we didn't agree or decide on a decision fast enough, and it just kind of like went with the one that was highlighted. So overall, I thought like the mechanics of it worked really well. But then in terms of like the actual story, it was variable. There was like some aspects that I was much more into and some aspects that I was not as into. So I just kind of wanted to go through some of those thoughts that I had and where I was like really engaged with it, and then other points where I was like not feeling it as much. I think in terms of what I wasn't feeling, part of like what I remember from Choose Your Own Adventure books, like it's often like a fantasy or, sci-fi or some sort of non-realistic scenario in which all of your options like seem kind of outside of your own experience in the first place. So like if you're in the temple and you're going to steal the statue or not steal the statue, there's like some distance because that's not a choice you often have to make in reality. And also the fact that you're reading, you can imagine what's happening, but you're not seeing the character that is your doppelganger experiencing these things and making these choices on their own. And I think that distance actually kind of helps as well with like fail conditions or making choices where you don't feel like either choice is great or you're not sure. Whereas like when you're watching a young man, like in Bandersnatch, Stefan is like, in his 20s or something, make these decisions, like it's much more, it feels more real and it feels more present and it feels more like you are the person who is actually experiencing these things. So then when you're kind of narratively forced into choices like, I'm going to stop taking my psychiatric medication. Originally that was a choice that I was like really opposed to making as someone who's on medication and knows that like that's pretty important. And then feeling that the story is pulling you, like because of the warped, twisted, dark nature of the story, like you feel like that's clearly what it wants you to do. But I resisted that, and then eventually you get stuck in a position where okay, you don't have that choice anymore. You have to go back. You get sort of like one of the endings that isn't really an ending. It's more like you've hit a dead end. And then, the option is kind of taken away from you and you have to just go off into that path because that's the real story. There's only, it was something that became really present to me and really clear. You choose your own adventure, but there are a few endings that you need to make certain choices to get to. It's not like a real ending if you fall into the pit and die. It's an ending of the book and it's the ending of that path, but that doesn't have the same satisfaction of a narrative ending that the author has intended you to reach as a conclusion to the story. So having those choices be really present and in a more realistic situation where you're feeling these things and they're things that you can connect to and choices that you might have made in your life or have thought about in your life, it makes it harder to actually feel like you have that freedom and the kind of the resistance between you having choice and then the author needing you to make certain decisions that you wouldn't want to make in order to get to like a satisfactory ending felt a lot more present in this work than in like choose your own adventure books that I've read, which was interesting and a little bit frustrating. And it's like so clear that it wants to be like a dark, twisted Black Mirror story. And of course you would stop taking your medicine because like you need to see how far the rabbit hole goes. Another aspect that was weird that kind of ties into like the, you stop taking your medication or whatever, was like the entire story centers around someone who clearly is undergoing treatment, has experienced trauma, is on medication, and then like starts exhibiting to everyone else in the world, starts exhibiting symptoms that are like very connected to potential schizophrenia or like hallucinations or these other things that have a real basis in mental health conditions. But at the same time, like, you know that he is actually experiencing those things. And the way the story is laid out, like, he's like, someone's controlling me. And that's the truth. And it very explicitly plays with that and acknowledges that. And where it gets very meta in that way is kind of where I liked it more. But at the end of the day, it's still positioning him as like the person who is correct. Whereas in like the actual world, the vast majority of the time that is not the case. And so there's this tension between like what you know would be a good way to approach this or to tackle this in real life and, the justified reactions of the people around him versus like, but no, it's actually real this time and those people are wrong. And that just felt like not fully explored or like weirdly uncomfortable. Like the therapist, is like ineffective and framed as such because it's from Stephen's perspective. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, this person totally has a right to be concerned because like what he is saying is so symptomatic of these like conditions that are real and present. And it was just like kind of a mess in that regard. The plot lines that I most enjoyed were the ones where it got very aware of the relationship. And, it's like he becomes aware of you as the controller, as someone influencing his choices, and you have that communication through the computer screen. When when you can send him a certain symbol and the Netflix logo came up first, I was like, oh my god, that's so like fucking cheesy that Netflix is like, placing itself in here. But then when it actually fleshed that out like a little bit more, I was so on board with it because I really wanted to find out more about like how this relationship would develop. But then very quickly that plot line turns into like nonsense with like the fight or whatever. And just the whole therapist like thesis that, if someone's controlling you, why wouldn't it be something more interesting? Why would it just be like you in a therapy session talking about this? And I'm like, no, like that's really interesting. That's the thing I'm most interested in. Like having like a weird fight is not interesting to me. And I get that's like a joke and it was meant to be funny and exaggerated. But I do feel like there was like a tiny moment where it was really exploring a relationship between viewer / participant and character that was like really fascinating. And then they were like, wow, this is getting like really interesting. Let's just move on to something completely ridiculous. So there was like a sliver of real like thought-provoking yumminess that I ate. It was like if I didn't enjoy the outside of an Oreo, but I really like the cream, which is probably the opposite of how I feel in real life. But is there more cream than... I don't know. This is a bad metaphor. Anyway, I really liked that. And then it kind of like immediately went further than could be like seriously considered as cool theoretical exploration and was just ridiculousness. In terms of the endings, the first one that I got, and I'm counting it as like an ending with credits that feels kind of like complete rather than the dead end where you like have to pick to go back to the last decision or to like a different point. The first one I got was the one where he goes back into his memories or back in time or, you know, wherever, and decides, like, he finds the rabbit. His dad gives it back to him. He puts it under the bed, and then he goes with his mom and dies on the train. And there's like relatively happy music. And then of course, like, he dies in the present, you know, because obviously when you die in your childhood, you die in your present as well. And I like really happy with that ending. And having like read a little bit more about the options afterwards, I think that that's probably the best ending that you can get in it, in my opinion. So somehow we just made it so that we salvaged as good a time as we could have. The other main ending that we did go back and end up doing, we decided to go back and fight her. So the other ending we got was like, that was really happening in his reality. And it was not a Netflix scenario. And his dad is like pulling him out of the therapist's office with the assumption that like he just attacked his therapist for no reason, which is an ending. I feel like a lot of them, having read about other ones, really tie into the sort of like warped, dark, you know, unbelievable, gritty storytelling aspect of it. Which, like, I'm really, like, I actually like movies like that. I have a much higher tolerance for, like, gritty or grim dark or, like, all these things that people are tired of. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm pretty happy with it. But again, it's just the fact that, like, in a form of media in which you have the illusion of choice, the fact that, except for the first ending I got, all of the other endings seem to tonally be very consistent in that like gritty darkness. It's like, how much choice do you really have to affect an outcome when the outcomes you're given all have the same atmosphere and like conclusion and tone to them, where it's like, you know, isn't this like a weird warped dark fantasy type thing? I feel like some of what they were trying to do with those plot lines would have worked better in a longer series, but when it's just like a roughly movie length format, and you're trying to establish this whole like symbolic condition in which you become aware of these choices, and you know, like the plot, like the symbol with the thing. That's hard to do backward, but I feel like I actually did a really good job. You know, one of the endings where Colin's daughter is like a Netflix person, and like she kind of gets, it's like a, you know, like a disease, they're kind of making it, or like an awareness or an illness, that you become aware of these options that are being made for you, and these choices that are being made for you. Like, I feel like that's the end of a season of television rather than just like an hour and a half of getting to know someone and then having them suddenly discover this. I did actually kind of like, you know, at one point we went into the dad's office and we got the outcome where it's implied that like the whole relationship with him and his father is like an experiment where he's purposely traumatized and is being studied to like see his behavior afterwards. That was really cool at first. Like, I was like, oh, it's like Truman Show. Like, you know, my simple mind is like blown. But, you know, that's just one of the possibilities. And so when that is something that could or could not be real, but you're trying to maintain this overall sort of fear around the symbology and the author of the book and like his deeds, and the fact that this is something that can kind of like transfer from one person to the next, it doesn't feel like permanent enough to really have that impact. Although it does kind of tie into something else that I really did enjoy. I actually really liked the way, especially the dad is sort of like, it's like quantum characterization where, and I feel like this is where it also gets closest to what really obnoxious Colin was saying during the acid trip, which is like all of these choices like affect what we're doing in the present. You know, and if we make a decision, whatever, like if we die here, like it doesn't matter, we're going to keep going, but it does have an impact on who we are, even though we're not aware of it. I feel like some of the characterization is most successful when you've seen all these things happen and you don't know whether or not in your current like plot line if those are all relevant, but you actually kind of feel like they have an impact. And like I said, especially with the dad, like he's alternately like kind of like a bumbling, well-meaning, but like emotionally incapable father who's just like trying to do his best and care for his son who's like traumatized. Or he's like a weird, terrible scientist who's experimenting on this kid who like may or may not even be his son. Or he's a murder victim, or he's like just kind of an asshole who didn't want his son to like have a toy, and like never back down on that. Or he's someone who felt that way and then softened. And I feel like in that sense, it was actually really cool to see all of that kind of tag along. Even when you've gone back and some of those things aren't relevant anymore, I think they still kind of carried over and had an impact on me, more so than like some of the other like wacky decisions. When it was really focused on like character intention and the person that someone is and like the options that they could carry out in their life. That was really cool. But when it's like, who's gonna jump off the balcony? And I'm like, well, you know, I'd rather no one jump off the balcony, but like, I guess I have to choose someone to jump off the balcony. And then, you know, oh, I chose myself and that didn't work out. So I guess I'll have to choose this next person next time. Couple other little things. I did actually really like the first, it felt like a trick ending and it was really good training actually. I don't know if like a bunch of other people did it or not. But like the first real option you get that affects an outcome is when the game producer or the like studio manager or whatever like is like, we're just going to give you a bunch of teams and we'll have it up by Christmas. And of course, like I said yes to that because I haven't known this main character for very long and it seems like what he wants. So I hit yes, and then it comes out with 1 star, and it's like, it was really clever in that it seemed like the right outcome. And it's like a fail condition, but at the same time, it's so quick. It really trains you to be okay with going back and making other decisions and like being wrong about stuff, which I think was helpful because otherwise I feel like it might be a little more frustrating to like make that wrong decision if you've invested more time in it. So the fact that they set up a failure that many people would probably hit very early allows you to kind of keep going and push on through it. And again, with like the star rating for the game, getting 1 star is like an insult. So of course you want to keep going. Although I did read that like there's no way that you can get like a good rating for your game. Which after I got the 2 like main endings that I got kind of helped me be like, I'm done with this. Another thing was Colin as a character. Like I realized that character is supposed to be like somewhat annoying, like respected but annoying, like wonderkind who's like obnoxiously prescient and like knows all this stuff. And they did a good job with it, but sometimes it's like too good of a job. All the scenes where he's like in the studio or you know, whatever. Basically everything besides the acid trip is what I'm talking about, because he just gets so obnoxious. And I realize it's like they're playing up the acid trip and he's like divulging all these secrets, but it's just like, oh my god, I just want to punch him in the face. And then when he like sends that tape, which is like not helpful at all, you know, it's like basically just kill someone. Like you should kill someone. And you know, who knows if like he's in on it or whatever, you know, like obviously I don't have a complete knowledge about this characterization, but I do feel like from the past that I chose, he goes from like an understandable obnoxious character to someone who's like extremely obnoxious for not a reason that is explained in all of the paths very quickly. But I also like his hair, so there you go. Makes it all okay. I think that's it. I'm trying to think if I have any other thoughts about Bandersnatch. I really enjoy that it has that symbol on the Netflix thing, like, this one's interactive. And they made that really beautiful symbol to like go on the title card when you're like scrolling through stuff, as if they were going to have like a bunch more, and it would be like a really important symbol to know like which ones are interactive. And when I saw it, when it first came out, I was like, wow, they're like making it a thing. There's going to be more of these. And no. So it's just the only one that gets a symbol. Unless I'm wrong, but I feel like I would have heard about it. And they probably would have advertised the shit out of it too. So yeah. Black Mirror. Yeah, it was very Black Mirror. Interactive menus, very good. Some cool character stuff. Cool exploration of relationship between viewer and character. And then a whole bunch of like very, very purposeful, dark, gritty bleep blorp. So I don't know what else I really would have expected.